They played my old violin solo at the town talent show, and the entire auditorium went silent. My sister's smile froze. My mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. No one knew it was me, until the standing ovation. "Hi, I'm Riley." I was always the girl behind the curtain, the one holding the clipboard while my family smiled under the lights. They called me the poor girl, sapin fragile, invisible. But I had something they didn't know how to measure: resilience. What happens when the girl they overlooked becomes the name on the $3 million grant? Stick around and I'll show you. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. They gave my sister the spotlight and me the clipboard. Again. The auditorium hadn't changed since we were kids. The same varnished floors that squeaked no matter how careful you stepped. The same burnt popcorn smell drifting from the vending station, mixing with dust and lemon cleaner. Rows of fold-out chairs waited to be filled, and somewhere under the low hum of fluorescent lights, I could hear my own breath. I arrived early, as always, not because anyone asked. They didn't need to. I knew the drill. Power strip for the mic cables, check. Extra batteries for the headsets, check. Tape for the floor markers, check. The things no one notices until they're missing. A young volunteer with braces and a tangled ponytail passed by me without making eye contact, mumbling something about needing gaffer tape. I handed it to her from the pouch at my side. She took it without a word. I glanced over the printed program lying on the table near the entrance. Town Talent Showcase 2023 was printed in bold script at the top. Below, I scanned the names, performers, MCs, even the sound booth techs, until I reached the last line in a smaller, fainter font. Logistics support, Riley Granger. I folded the program and slipped it into my tote bag. It wouldn't matter. No one ever read the last line. From the other side of the curtain, a wave of laughter rolled through the air. That was Sloane. I didn't even need to look. Her laugh had always carried like a bell, bright, effortless, meant to be heard. She was already working the room, hugging people she hadn't seen in years, complimenting babies, making everyone feel like they'd never really left town. Margaret, our mother, arrived 15 minutes late naturally, not that anyone would call her out for it. Her voice cut through the chatter as she approached a woman I vaguely recognized from church. "Riley's always been the practical one," she said, loud enough to echo off the gym ceiling. "She prefers to help." No one corrected her. They rarely did. I kept folding programs into neat stacks, pretending I couldn't hear her, pretending it didn't land the way it always did, soft and sharp at once. I remembered telling her when I was 8 that I wanted to perform one day. Her hand on my head was gentle then. "You're a helper, Riley," she'd said. "Some people shine better behind the curtain." Maybe I should have believed her less. "Delivery!" Sloane's voice floated toward me. She walked in holding a garment bag, twirling it like it was a prize. "For you," she smiled, unzipping the plastic with a flourish. Something with character. Very small-town, humble vibes. She draped the dress over my arm before I could respond. It was yellow, wrinkled, slightly stained at the collar and missing a button near the waist. I touched the fabric, thin, itchy, smelling faintly of attic cedar and something else I couldn't name. "It'll fit," she said, already turning away. "It'll add authenticity." I didn't say anything. I didn't have the words. Or maybe I did, but I'd learned the cost of using them. Instead, I slipped away into the backstage hallway, the dress still limp in my hands like something not fully awake. I found a quiet corner near the storage closet where no one would see me. Sitting on a folding chair, I let the fabric pool in my lap. The hum of the stage lights buzzed faintly above, the sound of everyone else preparing, talking, laughing, adjusting mic levels, filtered through the thin walls. Then I heard Sloane again, this time talking to someone just outside the hallway entrance. "Oh, the solo? Yeah, we reassigned that. The mayor's niece wanted to play, and Mom thought it'd be a nice gesture. Riley'll be fine." She wasn't even officially on the list. The words landed heavy, but familiar. Not a slap, more like a cold hand on your neck. I stood and walked quickly toward the nearest restroom, locked the door, sat on the closed toilet lid. The dress was still in my hands. I clutched it tighter. My phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "Still want to rehearse tomorrow?" I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering over the letters. Yes. Same time? I hit backspace. Then again. Sure. We'll make it better. Deleted. I started a third draft. Still want to rehearse tomorrow? But before I could send it, I closed the message app. My finger hovered above the power button. I shut the phone off entirely. In the silence, I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. The overhead lighting wasn't kind. The yellow of the dress clashed with the exhaustion under my eyes. I didn't cry. I just sat there, still and quiet. Sometimes the heaviest moments don't come with a bang. Sometimes they just hum, low, steady, like a question that never quite gets asked out loud. I used to think if I did everything right, someone would finally see me. The apartment was quiet except for the soft creak of floorboards under my heels. Morning light leaked through the slats of the blinds, casting stripes across my coffee table and the violin case beside it. I sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop open, a mug of black tea cooling beside me. On the screen, a younger version of me stood in a tiny recital hall. I must have been 21. My shoulders were square, my fingers poised over the strings. I hadn't watched this video in years, but now I pressed play. The bow met the strings and the sound filled the room, my old apartment and that college auditorium. The piece wasn't perfect, the lighting was uneven, and my stance was a little stiff. But the emotion was there, raw and undiluted. I had written the solo myself. No one in my family had ever seen it. They were supposed to come, they didn't. I remembered that day too clearly. The text had come an hour before the performance. Margaret. Sorry, sweetie, Sloan's nail tech had a cancellation. We'll celebrate this weekend, okay? Proud of you. I had read the message sitting alone backstage, holding a water bottle in one hand and my phone in the other. No one from home showed up. I set up the camera myself, balanced on a stack of books on an empty chair. Back in the present, the video reached its final note. I didn't blink. I just stared at the frozen frame, my younger self with her bow lowered, head still, the audience faintly clapping. That version of me had thought the silence afterward was normal. That applause from strangers would be enough. Now I knew better. My phone buzzed. Elena. Still okay to rehearse later? I found my old sheet music. I smiled without smiling. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood and crossed the room to my bookshelf. Between the poetry volumes and notebooks, I kept a slim wooden box. Inside were flash drives, mini DV tapes, and CDs, my quiet archive. Recitals, community fundraisers, hospital performances, dozens of moments no one ever asked about. I pulled out a flash drive labeled Fall Showcase, 2016, VA Hospital, then another, Original Composition, Senior Recital, 2014. Finally, one labeled simply Bowline Solo, June 2015. I returned to my laptop, plugged in the drive, and waited. The file opened easily, a 6-minute video, the same recital I had just watched. I opened Dropbox, dragged the file in, and watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Outside, a leaf blower started up. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. But in my apartment, it was still. So still, it felt like I was waiting for something invisible to shift. Later that day, I returned to the high school auditorium. I wasn't scheduled to be there, but no one questioned it. I walked in through the side entrance and took a seat in the back row. The janitor was vacuuming between bleachers. A handful of students were practicing, a tap routine, a guitar duet. The room smelled of floor wax and pencil shavings. I didn't bring my clipboard, just my violin case and a notebook. That's when I heard them, Sloane's voice, somewhere behind the curtains. Bright, amused, bouncing off the cinder block walls. She's sweet, bless her, But she's not stage material, she was saying. Another voice responded. Lower, male, unfamiliar? Oh? She's earnest, Sloane continued, but letting her play would be a charity act. It's better this way. I didn't move, not because I was shocked, because I'd heard it before. Different words, same notes. I stayed there for a long moment, then quietly made my way to the back hallway, slipped into the teacher's lounge, and sat at the small table near the vending machine. I opened my laptop again. The Dropbox file was ready. I started composing the email to event.backupsubmission@langtown.org subject, alternate submission, if needed, message. Attached is a possible alternate performance file for slot 7B in case of unforeseen changes. No attribution needed. I didn't sign it. I didn't explain it. Just included the Dropbox link. Then I hovered over the send button. On the screen, the video still showed my younger self, frozen mid-bow, eyes closed. I remembered how I had felt that day, scared, focused, hopeful. No one clapped loudly. No one stood, but I had played anyway. I clicked. The email disappeared from my outbox, and then seconds later, a soft ping. Reply. File received. Thank you. I stared at the screen. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake, but something deep in my chest tightened, then loosened, like I'd opened a window after holding my breath too long. I didn't know if what I did was brave or foolish, but I'd sent it. Finally, I'd sent it. They were expecting backup music. What they got was 6 minutes of proof. The gymnasium buzzed like a warm hive, rows of folding chairs filled with parents, toddlers wobbling with juice boxes, and teens scrolling their phones while pretending to cheer for classmates. Paper lanterns swayed slightly above the stage. A table in the back served hot cider and mini cupcakes with orange frosting that stained your fingers. I hovered near the backstage curtain with my clipboard. Not that anyone looked twice at me. My name tag simply read Event Support. Mrs. Healy had patted my shoulder earlier and whispered, "You're such a blessing, Riley. We'd fall apart without your lists." It wasn't unkind, but it wasn't seeing either. Sloane was a few steps away, resplendent in her fitted blazer, laughing with a group of local business owners. She had that ability to command a room without even trying. Something that used to make me feel small. Now it just made me tired. The program was running late. A middle school dance troupe had gone over their time, and Elena's slot was next, except she wasn't here. Her mom had texted to say she'd come down with a fever that morning. I hadn't told anyone, just made a small check mark beside her name. I was still holding the clipboard when I heard the MC clear his throat into the mic. Mr. Wallace, one of the history teachers, always volunteered to host. His voice had the slow drawl of a man who once wanted to be on radio. "Well," he said, pausing as the crowd settled, "looks like our next act had to cancel last minute. But lucky for us, we've got a backup submission. A very special one, actually. So sit back and enjoy this surprise performance." I didn't breathe. The lights dimmed. The screen came to life. There I was, 10 years younger, my hair shorter, my face rounder, my bow steady in my hand. The recital hall looked smaller than I remembered, but the sound was crisp, clean, unfiltered. My bow slid across the strings with certainty, each note rising, falling, weaving into the next. The gymnasium fell silent. I stood in the shadows, inches from the stage edge, staring out at a sea of faces. None of them knew. Not yet. Not really. From my angle, I could just see the front row. Margaret had stopped chatting. Her posture was too straight, her head tilted slightly as if trying to recognize the person on screen. Sloane's smile faltered. Dana Bellamy, who I only recognized from grant websites and the occasional article in the community paper, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with interest. And Mr. Camden, the guest judge flown in from New York, clasped his hands beneath his chin, like someone watching an opera unfold. No one moved. No one whispered. I hadn't played for applause. I hadn't sent the video expecting anything. But still, standing there, watching their faces shift, I felt the strangest sensation rise in my throat. Not pride exactly, not revenge, just space. Air where there hadn't been any before. The final note held for half a second longer than I remembered. My head bowed on screen, then faded to black. The room stayed quiet. Then a ripple of clapping. Slow at first, then rising, spreading across the gym like wind through wheat. Even the toddlers stopped squirming. Even the students looked up from their phones. Applause. For me. Even if they didn't know it, I didn't step forward, didn't raise my hand. I remained where I was, behind the curtain, clipboard at my side. My cheeks were warm, my spine straighter. Backstage, Sloane's voice sliced through the moment like a pin popping a balloon. Who sent that video? Her tone wasn't curious. It was cold, calculating, like someone trying to identify a problem before it spread. Margaret didn't answer right away. She was still staring at the screen, now blank again, the next performer fumbling with a ukulele beside the stage. Finally, I heard her murmur, "That wasn't supposed to happen." I turned away before they could look around. My hands felt steady, even as my heart pounded. Let them wonder. Let them try to piece it together. I didn't need to say a word. They didn't call me talented, or brave, or even capable. They called me fragile, as if the truth I'd released into the world might break me before it broke them. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me out of shallow sleep. It was barely past 7 Sunday morning, but the screen was already lit up with notifications. Missed calls, message requests, group chat tags I didn't remember joining. I blinked hard and reached for my glasses. At first, it didn't make sense. A forwarded Facebook post from the Lancaster Neighbors group. The thumbnail showed my face, except it wasn't from the performance. It was backstage, just after. I was sitting near the supply crates, head down, one hand pressed to my chest, like I was trying to hold something in. I tapped the video. The audio was stripped, replaced with dramatic piano music, the kind you'd hear in a documentary about betrayal or tragedy. Over the clip, white letters faded in and out. Unstable, disrespectful, disgraced daughter. I stared numb as it played through moments I barely remembered. My fingers shaking, my breath uneven, all of it cut from after the performance, none of it from the recital itself. At the end, one line filled the screen. Sometimes the people we raise become strangers. Posted from Margaret Haley's verified account. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat very, very still. My heart thudded against my ribs like it had been locked in a room too long. Then came the next wave, screenshots from neighbors, a message from the HOA secretary. Subject, emergency meeting request, allegation of community defamation. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint claiming I'd deliberately misrepresented the town's youth event by submitting a performance without permission, that my video had caused division, confusion, and emotional unrest. They hadn't included my name, but the target was clear. I stared at the screen, then slowly stood and crossed to the kitchen counter, where a pile of unopened mail sat beside a chipped ceramic mug. I sifted through the stack, found the manila envelope I'd tucked away months ago, the one with my dad's old notarized grant paperwork, the recital's original timestamp, and the untouched file from 10 years ago. By noon, I'd added screenshots, metadata, and a brief cover letter stating the facts. By 6 p.m., I was sitting at the back of the local clubhouse, my documents in a file folder on my lap. The room looked like every HOA meeting I remembered from childhood. Folding chairs in uneven rows, a long folding table at the front, plastic pitchers of water, mismatched pens scattered across paper agendas. The walls were still the same pale green, the same weak fluorescent lighting buzzed above. Margaret was already seated near the front. Sloane beside her, arms crossed tight over a tailored coat. They didn't turn when I walked in. The chairperson, Mr. Elkins, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he said, voice dry but firm. "We've been made aware of a digital media post, as well as concerns about its origin and impact on last night's community event. Miss Haley has asked to speak." I stood. Not quickly, not with drama, just calmly, deliberately. I walked to the front and placed the file folder on the table. "I didn't make the video that's been circulating," I said, "but I know who did." A few people shifted in their seats. I opened the folder, pulling out the printed Wi-Fi metadata first. "This is the network that uploaded the viral clip," I said. "Haley Guest, my family's home network, uploaded 3 days ago, 5:43 p.m. Next came the media release form, one that bore signatures, both forged. I never submitted this. I submitted a recital video recorded 10 years ago. This is the timestamp. Public venue, no edits, no overlays. It was a substitute slot approved by the event coordinator for emergencies. No deception, no drama. I paused. This, I held up the now viral clip, was edited after the fact, music added, captions, cut from private backstage footage, without my consent. The room had gone quiet. Margaret finally looked up, her mouth in a hard line. "She's been fragile for years," she said, her voice trembling with control. "This kind of attention, it's overwhelming for her. We were trying to protect her." "By calling me unstable?" I asked, still calm. Mr. Camden, seated near the end of the table, shifted forward slightly. "We're not here for family disputes," Mr. Elkins said, holding up a hand. "We're here for facts, and you've provided them." He tapped his clipboard, then looked out at the room. "All those in favor of suspending Margaret Haley's community privileges, including access to digital communications, until further notice, raise your hands." The first hand to rise was Mrs. Green's, then Mr. Camden, then nearly every hand in the room. Margaret sat frozen. Sloane's face turned to stone. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. As the vote concluded, I turned to head back to my seat. That's when Mrs. Green rose. She was small, older, with silver hair and a cardigan that looked hand-knitted. She didn't speak loudly, but her words carried. "We should have seen you sooner," she said. "I'm sorry." My throat tightened. I gave a small nod, my eyes stinging, not from pain this time, just the weight of being recognized, and maybe, finally, released. I didn't go to the park because I needed fresh air. I went because I needed silence. The kind my grandfather used to wrap around me when the world felt too loud. There was a bench beneath a weeping willow, his bench. He'd sit there on Sunday afternoons, always with 2 cups of coffee and never any pressure to talk. He once told me, "Every star needs stillness to shine." Back then I thought it was just another one of his poeticisms. But that evening, as the sun melted gold over the grass, I finally understood. The bench looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe I'd grown, or maybe grief shrinks everything. I sat down and let the weight of the week settle across my shoulders. My fingers traced the wooden slats, expecting only old memories, and instead found something more. There it was, tucked underneath, shielded in a weatherproof envelope, yellowed at the corners, taped flat to the wood. My breath caught. He had told me, long ago and almost offhandedly, that if things ever got too loud, I'd know where to look, and now I had. Inside the envelope, a letter and a document. His handwriting, firm, neat, unmistakably his, danced across the page like music only I knew how to read. "If you found this, it means you stayed standing. I never needed you to win. I just hoped you wouldn't fold." Beneath that, a notarized trust, dated back nearly a decade. My name, clear, unmissable, typed at the top. He'd created it quietly while the rest of the family obsessed over Sloane's magazine spreads and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. A trust for me, for the quiet one, the one they tried to dim. I sat for a while after that, hands folded, heart surprisingly calm, not triumphant, not angry, just still. Later that night, my apartment welcomed me back with the usual creaks in the floorboards and hum of the fridge. I boiled water for tea, fed the stubborn orchid that refused to bloom, and laid the letter on my counter like a guest I didn't want to rush. Around 9, my laptop pinged. Subject: "We saw you." The sender: Dana Bellamy. I stared for a moment, then clicked. The email was short but firm. "We've been following the events from your town closely, but more than that, we've been following you. Your video, your performance, your presence spoke louder than 1,000 applications." My throat tightened. "The Bellamy Collective has voted unanimously. We are honored to award you the National Arts Resurgence Grant, $3 million in funding to support your creative work, however you define it." I didn't scream, didn't even smile at first. I just breathed, a long, slow breath that traveled through years of held-in air. I moved to the keyboard, my old upright piano chipped at the corner, 2 sticky keys from the last move. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I played something gentle, just a melody that came to me, like water finding the lowest place to rest. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I turned on the camera. My hair was undone. No makeup. Just me in a threadbare sweatshirt and tired eyes. "I was born into a family that treated me like a glitch," I said. "But I'm not asking for anything anymore. I'm declaring." I let the camera roll for a few seconds after. No fancy edits, no fade-outs. I uploaded the video to my personal page, not as a performance, just a mark, a name I could finally sign without flinching. It didn't take long. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. Sloan. Her name lit up the screen like static. The message read, "You're not the only Whitmore people follow now." I stared at it. No anger, no sting. Just a tired kind of clarity. I blocked the number. Then I turned off the lights, curled up beside the open window, and listened. Not for applause, but for something deeper. The kind of silence that doesn't mean being forgotten. The kind that means you're finally, truly seen. I used to wonder what it'd feel like to be seen. Not watched or judged or tolerated, but truly seen. Turns out it feels quiet. Clean, like stepping outside after a long storm and realizing the ground still holds. The newly renovated auditorium smelled of fresh paint and pine cleaner. Rows of velvet-cushioned seats replaced the old creaky foldouts. The town's emblem now gleamed above the stage lights, and beneath it stood Elena, violin tucked under her chin, bow hovering. She looked poised, more confident than the girl I first met struggling with scales. The piece she was about to play was one I used to practice in secret. Unseen, I'd called it. Back then, it felt like a name and a sentence all at once. Her first note rang out, soft but confident, and I let myself close my eyes just for a second. Not because I was escaping, because I was letting it in. When the final note faded, the applause rose, not explosive, but genuine. The MC stepped forward, a kind man with a voice like NPR on Sunday mornings. He smiled toward me. "Please welcome Riley Whitmore, recipient of the National Arts Resurgence Grant, and today namesake of the New Artistic Resilience Scholarship." My steps were calm. No spotlight felt too bright. The podium was a simple wood stand, and when I placed my fingers on it, I felt only steadiness. "I didn't win a show," I began, voice clear. I reclaimed a voice, one I thought had to stay small, but if that voice helps even one girl in this audience believe she matters, then that's enough. I didn't speak longer than needed. Applause followed, warm, respectful. Not because of flair, but because the room recognized something it had once overlooked. Afterward, I stepped outside into the winter air. The sidewalk sparkled under a dusting of salt and early snow. I spotted him, my father, standing off to the side near the parking curb. He opened his mouth like he had something to say. I didn't stop. I nodded once, gentle, not cold, and I kept walking. By the time I reached the end of the block, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Mentorship Opportunity. Miss Whitmore, would you consider mentoring next year's grant finalists? We believe your story could guide the next wave of voices. I stared at the screen a moment, then slipped the phone back into my coat pocket. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like an invitation. It didn't end with a spotlight or an ovation. It ended with a breath. A quiet moment where I no longer needed to explain who I was. Sometimes, the people who raise us won't recognize our strength until it no longer needs their approval. But that doesn't mean we weren't strong all along. In a world that favors loudness, quiet persistence is its own kind of courage. If this story reminded you of a time you felt unseen, yet kept going, I'd love to hear it. After all, every voice matters when someone finally listens.